Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi on this Sunday evening. Hope you had a great day. We've got a lot going on, so we're going to talk about the new tropical cyclone that is developing off the southeast coast of the United States. And we're also, of course, going to talk about Tropical Storm Harvey. And we have up the National Hurricane Center's new forecast, which actually reflects what most of the models have been doing today and what the radar has been indicating over the last few hours, that this thing is now drifting southeastward and may be headed for the Gulf of Mexico again, if only barely offshore, but looks like it might do that. And you can see how long it's going to take from where we are at this point as of 4 p.m. Sunday. It will move maybe all of 70 or 80 miles between now and 1 a.m. Tuesday, according to the Hurricane Center, and then back up over Galveston, Houston by 1 in the afternoon on Wednesday. The upside to what's happening with respect to the upper air is that if we're seeing Harvey on the models responding to a developing trough that's going to be dropping two troughs, actually, but that the models seem to be indicating now that the Harvey's going to respond to these troughs and move to the northeast, which might at least get the body of the tropical system out of Texas by Thursday or Friday. The other issue, of course, is whether we wind up going back to an old solution that the European offered days ago, where it tried to take an intact remnant system up the west side of the Appalachians and on northward, so that some of those rains will move up into the Ohio Valley and maybe over parts of the Northeast. Not that it would be anything like what they're getting in Texas, obviously, but at least some of the moisture might get up into this area. Just a real quick check on the latest Corpus Christi radar. Not that much has been happening down through the coastal bend in South Texas. All the action has been up in southeast Texas, and the back edge of the rain is actually just to the east of San Antonio, but you can see the echoes are kind of turning more southeast, northwest, southeast, and I think the actual center now is probably somewhere in here, either due west of Victoria or west-southwest of Victoria, and it looks like it's moving southeastward, so if that trend continues, we could see this move out into the Gulf, and by the way, some strengthening is not impossible. I don't think it gets back to, obviously it's not going to get back to what it was, but it could pick up a little juice, and perhaps we'll start to see, might see some stronger winds develop back over, to something maybe on the order of 50 knots or more, especially out in the open waters of the Gulf. I wouldn't be surprised if it got to a strong tropical storm again. It also complicates matters with respect to southeast Texas, because if it's going to go out and then come back up, there's going to be another big tropical surge of rain along about Tuesday into Wednesday, along with whatever falls tonight through Monday. And some areas have already gotten 2 to 3 feet, and the GFS gives another 2 feet of rain on top of it, and all the other models are pretty much in line with that. So we're going to get the video going, and then we'll come back and we'll address your questions. So just stand by. We're going to take a look at the potential tropical cyclone that is developing off the southeast coast of the United States, and the Hurricane Center is going to be issuing advisories on this as they initiate tropical storm watches for areas probably for the Carolinas and perhaps as far north as southern Virginia. You can see on the visible satellite loop from this afternoon that the system has become better organized. We do have evidence here of some kind of weak low-level circulation that is developing. You are seeing an increase in thunderstorm activity on the east side, along with the pretty good inflow of moisture being established from the eastern Gulf of Mexico and from the Atlantic. And all the models do something with this, but it's going to be one of these systems, as tucked in as it is along the coastline. Is it going to be running a low just offshore, right over the Gulf Stream? Is it going to be just inland? I mean, these are questions that we're going to have to try and figure out here with regards to whatever potential that exists with regards to rainfall and wind. But for now, this system does seem to be getting its act together slowly but surely. And if you take a look at the Jacksonville radar, and you can see how the echoes are looping in a counterclockwise fashion. So it looks like right in here somewhere there's some kind of broad low-level center. That's probably that is the reason why they're not making this a tropical depression or a tropical storm yet, because we don't have a core circulation with thunderstorms wrapping around it yet. But over time, it's likely to achieve that. And at that point, they'll upgrade it to a tropical depression or a tropical storm. But it seems to be that all the ingredients are there for this to develop. So we're going to take a look at some of the afternoon weather models and see how they handle all this. And you can also take a look on the side. Here is Tropical Storm Harvey, which is sitting west of Victoria, Texas. And that has much more to go with respect to not only rainfall, but models. About half of the models actually emerge this back out into the western Gulf of Mexico by this time tomorrow. So let's focus first, though, on what's going on with this low that's developing off the southeast coast. And as we move into tonight, it really doesn't move very much, but notice the NAM actually drifts it westward to just inland. This is the new NAM, and then starts to move it northeastward along or just inland of the coast, with an increasing area of rain to the north. By Monday night, it's raining across the Carolinas into southern Virginia, and then you have a core of rain and thunderstorms around where the center is. So depending on whether it's inland or not would determine, are we going to have a depression here? Is it going to be a tropical storm, or is it even going to be inland? It may just wind up that it may be the case that the NAM is just a little bit too far to the left with this. But it runs up to the northeast until it gets to eastern North Carolina, and then it begins to move east-northeastward out over the open waters of the Atlantic, and actually brings it fairly close. At this point, it's probably a hurricane, or at least a strong tropical storm approaching Nova Scotia. So let's look at the upper air. You take a look at why this thing doesn't move straight up the coast, and we've been, talking about the reasons over the last few days. Here we have the upper air for, I'm going to just roll it back a little bit. This is for Monday evening. There's that next upper air trough that's diving southward. Now, we've been talking about the fact that models have been kind of disagreeing over how far south the influence of that trough is, but it seems that as we get closer, the trough is a little bit deeper. So that's the reason why it's pulling Harvey back out into the Gulf of Mexico, and then eventually trying to pull it up to the northeast. But with respect to the system off the southeast coast, a trough like this would normally be a danger signal for the northern mid-Atlantic and the northeast, because troughs like this sometimes like to dive southeastward, and that would turn the flow along the east coast southerly. But what's happening here is that the upper trough, rather than doing that, is flattening out. You see how it goes from this sort of well-defined closed upper air system, and then as we move through Tuesday, it weakens and flattens out. So the flow along the east coast, instead of becoming southerly, becomes west-southwest. So anything that's out here is going to wind up going on out to the east-northeast, rather than moving northward. So now you might ask the next logical question, which is, well, how come it's weakening? Well, we'll widen it out, and if you look up at what's going on a little bit further to the north, there's another upper air trough in the stronger part of the jet stream that's running across southern Canada. That's effectively squashing this thing. If it weren't for that, you would have a trough that would look something like this, and that would bring it up the eastern seaboard. But you don't. You do have a trough swinging around in the southern part of that jet. The subtleties would be, if that trough is a little weaker, it might allow this upper air system to be stronger for a longer period of time, and that could possibly drag it a little further north. But models seem to be very consistent on the idea that that's not going to happen. And you'll notice at this point, you start to get a really strong reflection of the system as it deepens and heads toward the Canadian Maritimes. So we've been saying all along for you folks up in the Canadian Maritimes that you're going to need to pay close attention to this. And given the developments that we're seeing at the moment, certainly adds to that concern. Meanwhile, with Harvey, the NAM brings it back to the coast and takes it offshore and kind of straddles it there for about a day and a half or so. It actually lowers the pressure. And I would not be surprised, by the way, if it were to get far enough out into the Gulf Coast, into the Gulf of Mexico, and it wouldn't need to get out very far, that we could see it fire up again, perhaps into a strong tropical storm before it goes inland somewhere near Galveston or into extreme southeastern Texas, and then moves northward from there. The good thing about this is if that happens, it'll be in response to the action going on in the upper layers of the atmosphere, that maybe, just maybe, we can eventually get this thing moving out to the northeast rather than continuing to linger in Texas for the rest of this coming week and beyond. And we'll take a look at the European model, and we'll see where that takes us. And actually, the European does suggest that with the approaching another trough that's approaching in the northern part of the jet stream, that's what the European does do. It lifts it out to the northeast so that by Thursday, what's left of Harvey is in southeastern Arkansas and heading toward the Ohio Valley, and then eventually merges with whatever's going on up in Canada with this deep trough that's swinging into the east, and then takes it out and gone. So that might be potentially good news for Texas, if only because of the fact that it'll just get it out a few days faster. But there's still going to be devastating rains continuing into the middle part of the week. The European surface, and we'll back it up for you. I'll show you how it handles both systems. The European straddles a weaker low along the Carolina coast and then runs it out east-northeast from there. And you can see what it does with Harvey. It takes it from just west of Victoria, Texas. By Monday morning, it's actually just offshore near Corpus Christi, and it takes it out into the Gulf a good 60 or 70 miles before it then lifts it up as a strong tropical storm over Galveston Bay by Wednesday, and then moves it northeastward, slowly northeastward from there, and up the west side of the Appalachians. This could bring some of Harvey's rains into the northeast if this is correct, but there's still model disagreement with respect to this. The GFS, on the other hand, has a slightly different view in that it never quite takes Harvey out into the Gulf, and you can see it here. It actually does for a brief time and then just brings it back westward. So it would suggest that the troughing that's going on to the north is not going to be enough to pull it out, and it would also linger the rains for a few extra days across much of East Texas, and probably spread the rains out into North Texas and out toward the west. So that's going to be a big question, of course, to see which of these models has the better handle on it. And with respect to the system in the Atlantic, the GFS has develops this into a tropical storm, straddles it along or just inland or just off the coast till it gets to eastern North Carolina, and it actually edges it out a little further north than the other models do, and that could be because of the upper air. And we'll see it here. I mean, it still gets to the same place. Here's that upper low near Chicago by early Tuesday morning, but you can see how it squashes it out because of the trough that's approaching up to its northwest, just kind of flattens it all out. So it still gets to the same place, but it probably is suggesting that maybe that trough is not slightly less deep. The northern system is slightly less deep, and perhaps the upper low stays intact for a little while longer, that it winds up pulling the area of rain a little further north. I tend to think, it's been my opinion that with respect to the system off the southeast coast, that the rains, the GFS wants to bring that rain up all the way into southern New England, the northern edge of the rain, but with gales out in the coastal waters. But it's been my feeling that the northern extent of the rain maybe gets to southern New Jersey for a short time at the absolute furthest north point before it pulls out. There will be some impact to the coastal waters south of Long Island, east of New Jersey for a few days with respect to gales and rip currents at the beaches. So if you've got this week planned as a vacation week going into the Labor Day weekend, just be advised that the coastal waters are going to start getting roughed up probably beginning later Tuesday night and taking you further into Wednesday and for Thursday. Harvey right now on the satellite loop, and you can see it sort of spinning away. It really hasn't moved very much today. It's not too far from Victoria, Texas. The center is right here, still getting these bands with the circulation over the western Gulf, still getting these bands of very heavy rains coming out of the Gulf of Mexico and moving into the Galveston, Houston corridor. And you can see on the radar, they've had numerous severe thunderstorm, and there's a tornado warning here just west of Houston that pops up. You see 3 of them. Tornadoes in these types of situations tend to form quickly and disappear quickly. But you know what? If you've been told to evacuate and get on the roof of your house so that you avoid drowning, and then you see a tornado coming at you, and this is just really such a dire situation. You can see all the heavy rains that extend through much of southeast Texas. If you go south and west, though, from Victoria down to Corpus Christi right now, there really isn't much going on, and hasn't been for today. It's been relatively quiet there. And you know what? Let me pull up the rainfall. We can take a look at the total rainfall here on their radar so far, and storm total. And we've got this expanding area of 25-inch plus rains from Galveston to Houston. You can see how this is huge, and large areas of rain. The reds indicating a foot or more of rain, almost, back over to Beaumont, large concentration from Galveston on south and west, and north and west up to about Byron, Texas. So this whole area is just getting impacted very, very hard, and the inches just keep piling up. And actually, on the Doppler, I saw a Doppler estimate of a spot northwest of Houston that has received 43 inches of rain. I mean, that's just I can't even fathom what that means. That is just such a huge amount of rainfall. So I will stop it here for the weather part of it, and we'll chat a little bit more. So just hang on 1 second while we make the switch. Okay, so I can yap now. Really, this is hard to keep up with these, with not one now, but 2 tropical systems going on, especially with respect to Harvey and the historical event that we're seeing for southeast Texas. I mean, when this is all said and done, I think we'll probably wind up with a once every 500-year event. I mean, I've seen people throw those numbers around. You just don't see this sort of stuff very often, and everything just kind of lined up where the stalling is taking place right near the coast. And now, of course, we're dealing with this, what could be this added complication with the center drifting southeastward and getting back out over the coastal waters. I just want to show you the impact that Harvey had on the coastal waters. I have the water temperature map that was updated. Let me see. Let me see if I can get this to update. I can't. This is an old one. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I would have liked to have shown you, at least with respect to what the upwelling may have done to the water temperatures along the Gulf Coast, which were incredibly warm. There was a warm eddy there with the water temperatures well up into the 80s, and maybe even a few spots with 90-degree water. That's got to be gone now, and I'm sure the water was upwelled every bit of at least 3 to 5 degrees, if not more. So that is going to have some impact in that when it moves out, it's not going to have that juice of super warm water that it had before. The water will be warm, but it won't be warm enough to support it going back. Certainly, it's not going to go back to what it was. But it could very well pick up some strength into a strong tropical storm, which will probably bring gales back along the coast where they're still going on to strengthen them. But the added problem is the fact that it's going to enhance the rain even more, possibly for southeastern Texas, and another big surge of it for Tuesday into Wednesday. So that certainly has to be considered. This is really going to be incredible when it's all said and done. So they go and look back at just how this all evolved. And in the meantime, with respect to the system off the southeast coast of the United States, in a lot of ways, it looks like almost like a wintertime storm to me in how it's evolving. And you're going to get a low straddling along the coast, either just off or just inland. And then when it gets to North Carolina, it looks like I'm pretty confident it's going to shoot out east, northeast, or northeast. And that rain may get to the Delmarva Peninsula, might even make it to southern New Jersey, but I don't think it gets much further north than that. The GFS, the last couple of runs, wants to be further northwest than the other models. It's still giving it the general idea of a northeast motion, but it brings the rain a little further northwest. It wouldn't be a lot of rain, nothing that I think would cause any kind of serious problems if it were to wind up that the rain would be further north. For those of you who are going to argue, by the way, that the Canadian model was right, no, the Canadian model was not right. The Canadian model was wrong. The Canadian model had a full-fledged Category 2 plus hurricane rambling straight up the eastern seaboard. That is not what this is, and that is not what is happening. We had the old cold front stalled off the east coast, and a wave developing on that front, or at the bottom of the front. You just have this elongated area of low pressure that has seems to be acquiring a closed circulation, and it is at the very least subtropical, if not completely tropical. And I'm looking at the latest satellite loop of this right now. I mean, I can clearly see a low-level circulation and an expanding area of thunderstorms with it. Now we're going to have to see how it consolidates and where it winds up, where the actual low center winds up moving. So even if it straddles just inland, the bulk of the circulation with this is going to be out over off the southeast coast. So you could see the low center possibly strengthen to tropical storm strength, even though it might be just inland. I don't think that's impossible, an impossible scenario. Let's see. I'm going to just run to some of your jack balance. Someone just posted, I have to watch the East Coast on the 10 through the 15th. Okay, so let me address this now. There is another system coming off the African coast, but from the standpoint of what I'm dealing with here at the moment with two tropical systems, I'm really not going to put too much energy in the third at the moment. I did give it, a glance. All the models seem to have it, but I can tell you that the upper air would probably at this moment suggest that it'll wind up just being an ocean event. So you know what? Before we even think about that, why don't we let's let these first two systems play themselves out, and then we can hope that we don't have to deal with any kind of tropical system. You can see, from a meteorological standpoint, and for the weather geeks out there, me included, this sort of stuff is, gets your juices up and everything. But there were serious impacts, obviously. We can see what's happening through all of this with regards to Southeast Texas and the extreme heavy rain. So it's it's serious stuff, and it impacts lives. So we have to, we have to be really careful how we handle all this. I think by now, those of you who've been on here long enough and who follow me on Facebook know that I'm pretty even keeled. I have a very calm, logical approach to things. I don't get, bent out of shape over stuff. I certainly don't hype. I think when I express concern, then that's when you should worry about it. Okay, and I have not expressed any concern for the East, other than to report what's actually going on and to give you my forecast opinions about what's going on. But you will never see anything from me about something 10 days out and going off the deep end over it. Okay, I just don't do that. That's not who I am, and I think most of you kind of get that already, especially those of you who've been following me on Facebook for the last 3+ years. David Schwartz, what does the always comical Canadian do with Harvey? That's a good question. I think it followed the European, but it also, like the other ones, did bring it back out. But I've looked at so much today. I'm like, after a while, this stuff all starts looking the same. But let me just load the Canadian up. And the Canadian does have that Atlantic system too, by the way, but it never gets it west of 60. All right, so the Canadian is very, very similar to the European in that it brings it out into the Gulf of Mexico and strengthens it maybe a little bit and makes landfall somewhere between Beaumont, Texas, and Lake Charles, Louisiana, and then it goes northeast from there, kind of getting absorbed into the next cold front that moves through the eastern part of the United States. So actually, it not only follows the European model, but it seems to have actually had a reasonable run that makes reasonable sense. And with respect to 92L, which is now the tropical cyclone number 10, sitting off the southeast coast, the Canadian handles it much like the European does. It's actually maybe even be a little bit further south and east than the GFS is. Right now, the GFS is the furthest northwest with this. So it's consistent with the other models. So it did not wipe out the East Coast. Those of you watching from the Canadian Maritimes, I would pay attention to this, however, because there is a chance that you could probably see some effects from this, particularly from eastern Nova Scotia on up into Newfoundland. I'd pay a little attention to it over the next couple of days to see how the whole thing evolves. Let's see. Anthony Orr, Tropical Storm Amelia holds the record for the highest rainfall from one storm, 46 inches in Bluff, Texas, in 1978. I wonder, Anthony, if that may have already been challenged by the one Doppler estimate that I saw of 43+ inches. But that is different from what's been actually measured. So we'll see what the highest actual measured rainfall is and whether it matches that. I think there may be. I think there very well may be, especially when they get that second surge overnight in some areas, and then whatever happens Monday night into Wednesday, if the system winds up moving off the East Coast. Do I think the name Harvey will be retired? It's done. That's a done deal. You don't even have to question that. Harvey will never. It will be another name that goes down in the record books and never will be used again. How impossible is it for Harvey to get much better organized over the Gulf of Mexico? How possible it is. Steve, as I mentioned before, it has a few things working against it in that the proximity to the coast. It's only going to be moving offshore by, maybe 70 or 80 miles if the most aggressive model is correct. So there will be some hindrance there. The water temperatures are at least 3 to 5 degrees cooler. Let me see if I can pull up a current map of the water temperatures, and we can take a look. Okay. Yes. In fact, the shelf water where Harvey moved over, water temperatures are down in the low 80s as opposed to being in the mid to upper 80s. It would have to get, it would probably need to go 100 miles or more offshore in order for the water temperatures to really be favorable for it to strengthen quite a bit from where it is now. Given the tracks that are indicated and the water temperatures and a few other things that are going on, I kind of think that it's possible that we could see it perhaps strengthen to a stronger tropical storm. Back to a minimal hurricane, I think, is kind of pushing it, and certainly beyond that, I don't think is going to happen. Flood insurance, 15% of homes in Houston have flood insurance. Well, that's the reason why flood insurance is there. I don't know how much of Houston is actually considered to be in a federal flood zone. I know that just about all of southeastern Louisiana is in a federal flood zone, and that banks would require you to have flood insurance if you have a mortgage on a home there, especially if it's a rental property. So, you take your chances. Something like this happens once every 500 years. If you happen to be living through that time, when it happens, it's tragic. But what can you do? My pool went from 91 to 82 degrees in the last 3 days, so no development from my pool. Martin, I can tell you my pool's actually dropped from 81 to 76. So there's definitely no development happening over my pool. Delvin said the jet stream is in Iceland and the GFS of the African wave gets pulled into the central Atlantic. Yeah, there is a hole out there, given what the upper air is showing. There is a bit of a hole in the Atlantic that it may respond to, but it's a long ways away. There's a lot, you saw how much has changed and changed again with respect to Harvey, and how the upper air has changed and changed again. So you can only see what's being shown now. You can only react to what you have in front of you with what the model sees at the moment. But we'll see how the models handle that when we get closer, and when we get rid of whatever's along the East Coast at the moment, because like I said, one at a time, please. Let's see. I just want to make sure I got everybody here. Okay, so I think I got everybody's question answered either while the weather part was running or afterward. So I hope everybody had a terrific Sunday. Raymond says the only comparison to it, if it was a snowstorm, would be Buffalo, New York would have a snow band of 90 inches of snow in a 14-hour time frame. Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Everybody's got their thing with weather, be it thunderstorms or snow or hurricanes or tropical storms among you weather geeks out there, and I can respect that. Why don't we just wait till we get closer to the wintertime to start talking about wintertime stuff? Please. It's just way too early in the game for this, and we're not even into September yet. Let's get past the Labor Day weekend, which is next weekend. All right, so I hope everybody enjoyed the live stream tonight. We will not be back until tomorrow morning sometime, as it's back to work tomorrow. And I will be home Tuesday, so I will be able to live stream maybe during the day or during the evening. But otherwise, it's just going to be a normal week for me. And I hope everybody has a terrific last vacation type week of the summer. A few people have been asking me about, they all have, some people have vacation plans in and around my area of the Northeast, which is, basically anywhere from southern New England to southern New Jersey. You should be okay for a good chunk of the week, even if worst case scenario that the GFS was right, we'd get some rain and a little bit of wind here on Tuesday, but that would be about it. And I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that, the rain, as I've said, southernmost New Jersey is probably as far north as it gets. There will be gales offshore, and there will be rip currents and tide issues for this week with the onshore flow, and the fact that there will be a tropical or a semi-tropical system going through the coastal waters, so the surf is going to get kicked up in a big way. Just be aware of that. How long, Paul Sack, how long does it normally take for ocean water temperatures to moderate after a hurricane hits? I assume you mean that how long does it take for it to go back to where they were? Actually, not as long as you might think. The only problem here is the fact that the gales have been continuing off the coast, so there's been continuous upwelling of the water off the Gulf of Mexico. I would suspect that once everything settles down, the water can warm up really, really fast. I mean, all you'll need really is any kind of wind shift from the southeast. I'm sorry, wind shift to the southeast to start bringing in the water that's warmer just offshore back over to the coastal shelf. You could have the warm up happen almost overnight. I can remember an instance. I was in North Carolina back a number of years ago on vacation, and we had water temperatures up. I was north of Cape Hatteras, at the part of North Carolina on the Outer Banks where it bends northward, and it's really interesting how the water temperatures there can differ by just a handful of miles. But we had a west wind, and we literally had water temperatures that cooled down into the upper 60s for about 12 hours. And then during the night, the wind shifted to more of a southeast east wind, and within another 12 to 18 hours or so, the water temperatures were back up into the low 80s. So it can happen very quickly once everything settles down. Raymond wants to know, does the Northeast need to watch Thursday for storms? You do have the next cold front coming on Thursday, Raymond, and yeah, there probably could be some showers and storms with that, but I haven't really given a good look in terms of whether it would be enough to produce a severe weather potential. We don't have a lot of really warm tropical air around. The dew points aren't going to be all that high, so it might be tough to saturate the bottom of the atmosphere. But we get a little closer. I'll take a better look. Delvin, why do hurricanes show up in the 500 millibar anomalies as way cooler than the surrounding troughs, and so on? Well, remember, everything is relative now. So, if you've got a tropical system down south of 25 north, you could have a wrapped up hurricane and it's warm core, but remember, you're dealing with higher numbers. So the average temperatures and heights as you go up into the higher layers of the atmosphere are going to be higher than they are up where we are, obviously. And so, if it could still be warm, but the departure from normal is going to show up regardless. I hope that explains it. Delvin is talking about one of the upper air maps that I use where you see the blue and red, and you'd see sometimes with the tropical systems, it might have that bluish area over the tropical system, saying that it's colder than average aloft. But again, we're talking about colder than warm. We're talking about systems down in the tropics where we're talking about bigger numbers. John Balance, hot and steamy over New Jersey day here. I'm kind of not. You might want to retype that. I don't know if your spell check did something to it. Okay, Delvin says, "Oh, you're welcome." And would you call 92L cold pocket? I assume you mean cold core. Well, it's not truly. I don't. It's not a truly tropical, 100% tropical system at this point. So it's certainly partially tropical, but we'll have to see how it evolves over the next 24 hours. I'm going to give a quick look to the HRRR, by the way. Let me just take a look at this. And the HRRR, just for what it's worth, brings Harvey out over the coastal waters by 2 a.m. Monday morning, and actually drops the pressure down about 3 millibars to a 998, sitting off the coast of Texas, just east-northeast of Corpus Christi. while it has the system northeast of Florida down to about 1,004 millibars, it looks like. Doesn't change the pressure too much, and it has the low sitting right over Savannah. So that's the newest H-triple-R model with its never-to-be-humble opinion. Jeanette Riddle, you have got great weather in southeast Tennessee. Terrific. We've got, we'll go to the satellite. And yeah, I can see why you're in that dry pocket there across Tennessee and Kentucky. You see most of the weather across the east is pretty nice. The Carolinas are, nice and clear. Just some high clouds coming into coastal South Carolina. And there you can see the system off the southeast coast. And there you have Harvey. And, I'm noticing on the radar loops, I continue to notice the fact that the drift southeast is real. And here's that upper low. Here's that upper air system that's diving down. Okay, so this is going to have impact on Harvey. It's going to have impact on the system off the coast. And you'll notice, by the way, one of the clues that this is going to go out is if you look at where the clouds are in the Atlantic, they run from southeast of Newfoundland southwestward to off the Carolinas. If this cloud bank were up, say, in here, okay, then I would start to be concerned. But the basic frontal zone is out in the coastal waters. Now, initially, this will be able to hug the coast, but then eventually it's going to wind up going out to the northeast because this frontal zone is not going to really move very much. So, listen, you're getting the clues from the satellite in terms of where this is going to go, and ultimately it's going to be this upper air system. If it does what the models say it's supposed to do, then we're not going to have any serious issues, at least up my way, and for the Northeast and for most of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Long Island. Again, for the coastal waters, it's going to be a different story, and of course for the coast of Eastern Virginia down into South Carolina and maybe even into northern Georgia, depending on what how this low how the circulation center behaves. That's where there will be impact from the tropical cyclone that may become a tropical storm. All right, folks, I'm wiped out, so we're going to end it here. Have a great evening, and hope everybody has a great week ahead.